the powerless who became powerful through nothing more than hard work, and maybe a helpful dash of magic luck. It's a story told countless times all throughout history and fiction, but in the grand scheme of shonen, no two represent it better than them. The two series who kicked off the new gen era of manga into full swing, born without a superpower in a world of superheroes, and born without magic in a world of wizards. No greater roadblock could have stood in their way, but still with that helpful dash of divine plot intervention, these two would rise through the ranks to sit atop the respective hierarchy of their series' power scales. And while many would like you to believe that this fight hasn't and won't ever be close, claiming one of these characters has the strength of a godlike deity while the other is stuck firmly in some sort of ordinary human-level limbo, no matter what feat he acquires, how true is that actually? Does the perceived gap between these characters permanently keep this interesting battle from being close? Or are their new final saga power levels genuinely enough to level the playing field? Well, honestly, I think one group of fans won't be walking away too happy from this. So if you're ready to get into the battle of New Gen's two most iconic underdogs and see what's changed since the last time Death Battle touched this topic in 2022, then drop a sub down below to let me know. It's free, plus it helps the channel a lot. And this is why Deku Vs Asta isn't close. Now, since I know there's a pretty wide and vocal community who believes Deku is absolutely trash, both as a character and as a combatant, it's probably best to start with Mr. Rabbit Hat here. So, for all the anime-only watchers, before we actually get knee-deep into all the super neckbeardy manga spoilery calcs, I want to quickly go over Deku's power set because it and its lore are relatively significant in a fight with someone like Asta, who is even more so straightforward than him, which is definitely saying something, since if you were around on the anime scene back in 2016 like Grandpappy Tuckalmighty here, you've certainly heard the epic tale recounted to you of the young, workless Midoriya going on the quest for maximum gains to eat a blonde dude's hair, and then doing so, he not only gained a cult following in the anime sphere, but also his own magic gene-based superpower called a quirk. With his quirk, especially at first, being summed up quite well as punching people really hard. But as a shonen protagonist, Deku obviously didn't just end up stuck with one modest power to become the lamest X-Men ever. No, instead, the power he acquired was one of the most special and most powerful of all the quirks available to anyone in his entire universe, One for All. And One for All is a highly underrated ability because of its seemingly plain nature as a simple power boosting ability, especially during the earlier seasons. With some of those said early anime watchers still thinking to this day that Deku isn't really granted any other traits from One for All besides the stereotypical glow-in-the-dark anti-manga power-ups. So if you either stopped watching after the first few seasons or just haven't heard what Horikoshi's been cooking up in the last few years, Deku's quirk is in effect revealed to have passed on all the quirks of every user who came before him. So just as he had accepted the power from his master, their masters had passed it down to him, and now, like a Rule of Two Sith vessel, he has complete access to not only all of their original powers, but highly amplified versions of them, going by the names of Transference, Float, Smokescreen, Fa-Jiin, Gear Shift, Black Whip, and Danger Sense. And these 7 extra quirks all packed into one aren't the only new thing revealed by the later seasons of the anime, as we also find out that Deku basically has this entire round table of people stuck in his head which consists of the former users of One for All, basically granting 7.5 if you count All Might different individuals who can communicate with and support Deku mentally in battle. Now, while all of Deku's quirks are reasonably useful, we can break them down pretty clearly into the categories of new superpower or physical amps, with 4 being new superpowered abilities added to his arsenal of quirks, and the other 4 being more simple stat amplifications. So for the 4 power-based quirks, those would be Black Whip, Smokescreen, Float, and Transference. Smokescreen and Transference are both pretty much useless here, and self-explanatory since Asta won't be affected by a walking smoke grenade, and Transference basically only allows Deku to pass his quirk on to others, which you can imagine would be a pretty bad idea fighting someone that 97% of the internet already believes would crush him. However, Black Whip and Float on the other hand are quite useful, giving Deku long-range black tendrils that can subdue or wrap around enemies at long distances. Think of them sort of like how the Venom symbiote acts in the new Spider-Man game or films. whereas float does the obvious and allows Deku to basically stand on air. This would obviously be pretty practical against a dude with at least 2 or 3 different methods of flight. But as for the stat boosting quirks, with an exception for one which I'll talk about a little more in detail later, these are pretty much self-explanatory as well. Danger Sense, it lets him have Spider-Man-esque precog to avoid attacks. Fa-Jiin, in effect, allows him to use faux 100% attacks. These are the same as his old arm-breaking ones with no drawback. One for All, it gives him the power stacked boost of all the prior users, plus it's also where those iconic smash attacks come from. And Gear Shift. This is the one that's gonna need some more explanation, but for now, keep it in the back of your head that this boosts speed. But to be frank, if you knew literally anything about Deku before this point, none of this was really super big news to you, was it? So, what's really changed since 2017, 2018, and in Death Battle's case, 2022? Since even among those 8 quirks he has access to, they've all been in the manga for well over a year, and with no new overly broken hacks, how could this matchup have changed at all for Deku in the slightest? And well, dear viewer, for the sake of this matchup, it all really comes down to one new key factor that might just give the man a fighting chance. Deku's merging of the stat amplifying quirks into one ultimate Overdrive. This power has flipped so much of what we thought about Deku's scaling flat on its head, with many a fan, manga reader, and power scaler alike not having any idea of how to address him, since Deku's long-standing goalpost, All Might, has now undeniably been not just surpassed, but blown by at lightning speeds. And if you don't believe me yet, that's fine, because I'm gonna show you all the evidence for this going all the way back to Season 6 of the anime, where during the Paranormal Liberation War arc, we learn that 70% incomplete Tomura Shigaraki, the main villain of My Hero, is comparable in strength to All Might, as the series puts it. The distinction is important because through the constant statements in the series, we quickly learn that this Shigaraki is comparable directly with the USJ Nomu and an out-of-prime All Might. So what does any of this have to do with Deku, you might be asking? Well, if we go back even further into Season 3, we learn that Midoriya's One for All, while his body was so weak that it was capped at 5% of its usage, could muster power exactly the same as an old out-of-prime All Might during his fight with Muscular, once pushed to its arm-breaking 100% limit. This point is reiterated and made very clear throughout the series via the scars on Deku's arms, which were there to constantly remind us that if he managed to push his arms past that limit just 2 or 3 more times, they'd be paralyzed forever. Deku literally had to learn a whole new fighting style to compensate for this flaw for almost 2 seasons, up until, you guessed it, he punches Shigaraki in the face. However, the results of that aren't exactly what you'd expect from 2 characters who are supposed to be equal in stats. As Deku beats Shigaraki down, he breaks his jaw and nearly overwhelms him beyond the point of regeneration, with just a few of his maxed power punches. So does this mean Shigi was not actually All Might level? And if all this happened, are Deku's arms crippled? The answer to both is no, as we learn from statement after statement, as well as the literal doctors analyzing Deku's body. After the awakening of the other quirks in One for All, Deku's body and his maximum power grew stronger. Much stronger, in fact. Just as All Might said they would with time, and just the general nature of how the quirk transference works, by increasing in general power level every time it's passed down. If that still isn't enough to get you to believe, though, that Deku has thoroughly surpassed the Old Might level, not only do we have Deku in the next arc straight up saying that with 45% plus his new quirks, he has surpassed All Might, but he also one-shots the same Muscular who could tank a 100% punch using just 45% 3 seasons later, and we also have not 1 or 2, but 3 full statements following the completion of Shigaraki's surgery that the main villain of MHA is as fast, tough, and strong as Prime All Might, with all the versatility and quirks of All for One. And wouldn't you know it, Deku isn't just capable of matching him, but is outright stronger by every single metric. As with the merger of his quirks, like I mentioned before, Overdrive, for 5 or more minutes, despite his body still never even fully mastering One for All, Midoriya is able to fight consistently at 120% of his One for All's full power, on top of being granted 1 new hacks, which is space-bending reality warping speed. This is the second trait of the Gear Shift ability, as the quirk, once fused with One for All, allowed for him to apply his speed manipulation to whatever he touches, right down to the cellular level. And at its maximum output, it can completely nullify the concept of inertia, breaking the laws governing reality with his raw speed and power to do such broken things as stopping and turning on a dime even while moving at max speed, or converting one punch into 5 punches connecting with you all at the exact same time, which, as you guessed, this Detroit Smash quintuple could absolutely obliterate a Prime All Might level Shigaraki, who, oh, did I mention got a 3rd power-up, making him even more ridiculously durable. So yes, with narrative, feats, and scaling all to back it up, it's time to ask, how powerful was a Prime All Might anyways to even compare to Deku? And fortunately for us, Kohei Horikoshi gives us a pretty clear set of numbers and estimates to work with here, so that makes our job pretty easy when comparing All Might's power level to a potential Asta. As All Might says at the end of his fight with Nomu that back in his prime, the 300 blows it took him to win the fight could have been reduced to a mere 5. So any feats from characters on or below All Might's level can be multiplied many times over for Deku's max power. So I'll quickly just say, if you're charitable to Deku through the use of pixel scans, we can see Stars and Stripes literally nuke an incomplete Shigaraki with a super attack that causes a massive, bare minimum 3.7 kilometer deep hole, since we see the ocean floor here, and with even the lowest end calcs, that would come out to small country level or 10 to the 22, which after we apply the Prime All Might multiplier and the extra 20% which comes from Deku himself for Overdrive, you get something like 10 to the 24. For the sake of this video though, just think about this 24 part here to be like a power level of sorts, so I don't have to whip out the nerd textbook this late into the video to explain what it is. But if you really just don't like math at all, and line drawing stuff that has to go along with that, you can just say that fodder mid-tiers like Gigantomachia can casually plow through mountains via statements, with upscaling from countless island level feats and statements as well, and surprisingly a lot of cloud dispersal feats too, which should still get Deku into those country to small country level ranges, even without the calcs. But even all of those numbers are ignoring the fact that Deku is only using 45% of his maximum ability due to his frail body. So he can still perform those 100% bone-breaking attacks from his earlier days if we've all forgotten. So you could easily say that this current Deku, whose One for All has already grown to rival that of Prime All Might's, could muster power upwards of 3 times greater than anything mentioned here, just calculated by measuring the gap between a 120% and a 45%, which can get you numbers all the way creeping up into that 10 to the 25 range, as long as Deku's willing to break his arms. This logic should also apply to speed, but since I've bored you enough with the numbers by now, probably, I'll just tell you that Deku is one of those rare few characters who are sort of just definitely FTL. Incomplete Shigaraki uses FTL EM waves as part of his arsenal, Stars and Stripes can grab actual laser beams out of the sky, Aoyama has a laser beam too if you count it, and most significantly, Lady Nagant could fire a projectile nearly 210 kilometers in a little under a second, which healthy Shigaraki and far more so Deku, whose speed should be amped many times beyond 120% One for All, should scale to or far above. So we're easily looking at a character who's minimum in those large island to small country level ranges, while being far more accurately in the large country to potentially even continental ranges if you're very charitable with the lore, and he has access to a wide variety of hacks abilities, with his most significant having to do with speed as well as restraint. With all of that out of the way though, how does the complete and utter power of a true Devil Union post-Zetten manga Asta compare? Yeah, I'm just gonna have to be honest guys, this form would be a complete stomp. If you use current manga Asta, who has had 2 time skips, multiple power-ups, and somewhat recently just got another, did you really think these two would just be close because they're both final sagas? To put this into some perspective for you guys, this form of Asta one-shot a paladin, okay? And these paladins are compared directly to supreme ranking devils, with devils who are an entire rank below them being capable of obliterating the entire Clover kingdom in one shot pretty casually. Sort of an obvious country level feat, 10 to the 23, with the Dark Triad then being hinted at and even the weakest fully complete supreme ranking devils being outright stated to be far above this calc. placing them firmly into that 10 to the 25 plus range, while having the paladins easily outscale them due to their purification process. And again, post Zetten Asta went chop, and now one of those guys is just gone. So just trust me on this one, if based Asta was already one-shotting 10 to the 25 paladins and being stated to have neared or surpassed the level of a true devil union in his base, a form that could already square off with the planet-threatening Lucifero, all while ignoring Asta's many other earlier feats from Conrad's Doomgate in the movie to fighting a Japan-sized Hydra, without ever mentioning a Black Clover fan's favorite thing in the whole world, speed scaling, since while I usually try to be a bit more relaxed with my numbers, many people would say Asta has relativistic or sub-relativistic speeds as early as the first arc, with FTL bare minimum being passed at the first time skip, and that number being many times higher by the second. Even once again just forgetting the fact that Asta also has key sensing precog to neg any speed trickery Deku can do. And while sure, you could say Deku's reality warping overdrive could nerf Asta to a compatible level of speed, with maybe a hypothetical 100% arm-breaking fusion power that's highballed a little bit being enough to damage him, even this low-balled based Asta at 10 to the 25 is likely just straight up too strong for Deku to handle in any capacity. Without ever adding that Asta's anti-magic in all reality probably just negs all of Deku's quirks, which seem to have some sort of spiritual component beyond the DNA, or the fact that he just crushes with raw power, stacking these Zetten's tens of times multiplier, the Black Form, Devil Union, or others all on top of an arsenal of better stats and projectiles. So the only real argument I have in favor of Deku is if you're just like an anime only who doesn't know anything about their manga powers, and if you are, this fight is honestly probably gonna get a whole lot closer in the 2024 anime season, since up until his fight with Lilith and Nama, Asta's scaling is a bit more awkward and debatable due to this guy named Zigred. But honestly, you guys can go fight in the comments about what you think would go down if their anime forms squared off. Just be sure to check out the Big 3 versus Dark Trio before you go though, and that's all for today. Thanks, everyone.